working to help people to learn to self-differentiate and define themselves for decades. And this video is entitled, Stop Letting Others Define You. I hope you'll subscribe, like, comment, and join and support this channel so that more free videos can come your way. Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the book, The Four Agreements, he says there's a huge amount of freedom that comes to you when you take nothing personally. No one, as I believe, has the responsibility to define you or to define us. No one has that responsibility. That's our responsibility. Ruiz writes further, nothing others do is because of you, and that what others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. I love that quote. In working on reducing allowing others to define us, we want to and must remember we are not a label, we're not a role, we are not a demeaning statement, and we are not a put down. And it's helpful if we can begin to practice countering these things and countering these statements. And in my own case, I use an invisible filter, and it's a mental filter, to filter out high praise and to filter out negative labeling. When someone says something negative about me, I realize they are talking about their experience, not mine. And I think that's very important to remember, that when someone says something negative and is being critical or mean in that way, they're talking about their own experience. They just happen to use your name and are talking to you. For example, I've had some people on there are a couple of people who've mentioned, on YouTube comments, for example, and they say, well, Jerry, you're just blaming the victim. And I've been working with victims of trauma and abuse and problems and marital difficulties for decades. And I don't blame victims. I understand victims have been victimized. So they're not talking about me. They're talking about what they fear someone may be doing, and they often may not listen carefully to what someone's saying. And also there are many ways to look at a problem, and you can look at it different ways and not intend or choose or be doing the blaming of a victim. Another thing to remember in not letting others define you, stop absorbing, or as Ross Rosenberg says, observe, don't absorb. And I use that a lot with lots of people and with myself. I want to learn to observe and not to absorb. Observing is up here, absorbing is down here. And I want to use my mental capacity when someone's talking to me or trying to define me. I have also used a tool called Coca-Cola, in which when someone says something crazy or it makes no sense to me what they're saying about me or to me, I think of it as being them calling me a Coca-Cola. Well, how rational is it that I'm a Coca-Cola? I know I'm not a Coca-Cola. Why should I feel hurt because someone called me a Coca-Cola? And so I then reduce the amount of unnecessary suffering and the hurt from what they're saying, because I'm saying, well, there they go, calling me a Coca-Cola again, because it doesn't make any sense. And it's not who I am. Again, back to the beginning, it's about them. It's not about me. It's important that we trust our gut and trust our feelings. But when our gut is filling with our family of origin, then we want to work on those messages and emotional experiences that we are having. We need to get a coach, get a therapist, get in a support group so that we can work on those triggering emotions that are inside of us. If I've always felt I was worthless, and then somebody calls me worthless, which is of course like calling me a Coca-Cola, because it's totally untrue and really has nothing to do with reality, it triggers a feeling of worthlessness in me. So when those things happen, when those systems feelings happen, then I want to go get some help to get that feeling out of me. I'm not going to take their feeling in me. I'm going to work on my feeling in which their statement triggers me. Because their statement is saying, well, you're a Coca-Cola, and then I go cry for an hour because someone called me a Coca-Cola. That's really kind of irrational. Now, if I felt worthless, then I want to go work on my feelings of worthlessness, which are, again, negative messages, not true messages, not real messages. They were imprinted, or they might have been promoted by my family of origin, but they're not true. They're what I've learned. Well, if we've learned them, we can unlearn them. And that's the good news. I also think it's important that we see the anxiety in others. When you're being defined by someone else, generally their anxiety, often systems anxiety, but their anxiety has been triggered. And that's why they're needing or wanting to define you. Start looking to other people's anxiety and start observing that. I remember I had a boss, and again, she was relatively immature, not a bad person, but just immature. And she had grown up with some abuse and had some abusive relationships. And at that time, I was the only male in the department. And when she would make comments to me, like, well, I'm just going to have to watch you more carefully. And I'm kind of going, everybody's kind of going, well, Jerry's kind of the most full of integrity kind of employee we have. I mean, why has he got to be watched? Because she was dealing with her own anxiety. And I also noticed that her anxiety was triggered when she would say things like that. That would help me to calm down if I could understand her anxiety has been triggered. Then I know to watch out for what's going to be said and not take it to heart and not take it as a real critique. One of the primary ways to reduce absorption, and I said observe, don't absorb. One of the primary ways to reduce absorption is to practice reducing your anxiety, working to stay calm, stay in your head if necessary, and avoid as much as possible the overwhelming feelings. This takes practice. I understand that. Everything I teach and everything I talk about are things I have had to go through, endure, learn, and I still am learning them. I haven't arrived. I'm still learning these things. We may still feel anxious, but focus on your thinking process. Just because I'm anxious doesn't mean I can't try to work on focusing on my thinking process. What they're saying, they're highly anxious and triggered. They're saying these things to define me, and I must not take them as serious. And that they are not truly a definition of me. They are coming out of their anxiety. Check how you view yourself, how you define you. Are you a good person? Do you believe you're a good person? Do you believe you're a loving person, a caring person, a generous person? I didn't say, are you a perfectly good person? I didn't say you are a perfectly generous person. I'm saying, in general, are you a good person? Do you see yourself as being a good person? And defining ourselves as, I am a good person, flawed, but good. So we want to work on how we view ourselves. The Inner Bonding book by Margaret Paul is a place to start. No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz is another place to learn about accepting yourself. And then If You Meet My Family, You'd Understand by Jack Shitama. Shitama. And those might be some beginning places you can learn to accept and love yourself more. And people say, well, how do I learn to love myself? Do you know what I tell them? It's not a how question. It's a when question. It's like me asking you, how do I breathe? And I'm holding my breath. It's not a how question, it's a when. When you open your mouth and breathe, that's when you'll breathe and learn to breathe. And same way with loving yourself. There's not 5 techniques that tell you how to do that. There are things that might be fruits of that or evidence of you loving yourself. But loving yourself is a choice. Loving you is a choice whenever you're ready to make it. Whenever you're ready to do that. Now, you might fall back and not be loving yourself as much. Then you choose again. And we keep choosing and keep choosing, especially if we grew up in a dysfunctional family where we didn't feel loved. Now you're the parent for you as an adult. Not your family of origin, but you. Always remember when others are trying to define you, always remember they don't know you like you know you. They don't know you like you know you. In fact, nobody knows you like you know you. No one has fully walked in your shoes for the last many decades. And we always tend to think people can just know us. And there are many times that people will come in, and when I was in practice in marriage and family therapy, they would come in and they would think I have X-ray vision, or I can know them better than they know themselves. And it's kind of like, gosh, that's a superpower I don't have. Now, certainly I've learned some things. I can take some cues and kind of get some ideas, but I'm not in somebody's body. I don't know them. They've been with themselves for a long time. And so I want to be real careful about, what I say, what judgments I make, what conclusions I come to. I want to have them participating in that rather than me defining them. I can just tell you're a mean person. Well, I don't know. I don't know all that's going on inside of them. Maybe they're a traumatized person, not a mean person. They're mean on the outside, traumatized on the inside. No one has fully walked in your shoes. So when people go to define you, always remember, I hear what you're saying, but that's not me. And that's not all of me. And in fact, I'm not even sure it's any of me. And then I've had, people will say, let's say we have a situation in which we get triggered and then we avoid. And then you'll be blamed or labeled or criticized or defined as, well, you're just an avoider. No, I'm not an avoider. That is what I use when I get triggered and I am in a survival mode, or I don't know how to handle it any other way. That's different than I am just an avoider. So others don't know. They just see a snippet of your behavior and then want to define you. Don't accept that. Blaming is a form of defining others. We want to avoid blaming others. We want to ignore the blaming we get as well. And that blaming is often an emotional triangle between the other person, an issue they're having, and you. And you get pulled into by being the cause or the blame for this. And blaming is a form of defining of you. And I want to reject that. Someone clearly can talk to me out of concern or desire to, hey, Jerry, you had done something that hurt my feelings. But that's them talking about them. And then I realize, I think I did hurt their feelings. That wasn't a very kind thing to say. Versus being blamed. Because again, everyone wants to blame others for their feelings, their actions. And I want to learn to begin to reject that and reject that notion. Well, you're just hurting me. No, I may be doing something that's triggering your hurt, but I'm not trying to hurt you. I want to have that clarity, and that takes a while to learn that. Shoulds. That's another way of, shoulds are a way of defining you. Again, others defining you. Push back. These are shaming statements, or at the very least intrusive statements, and not respectful of your boundaries. When someone said, you should have done X, Y, and Z, no, wait, that's, you're not my parent. You're not a judge in a court of law. You're another human being just like I am. And shoulds don't feel good. And shoulds are shaming. Because that meant you messed up, you should have done this. Well, that's not helpful, and it's not accurate in terms of defining you. And like so many others, I like to change shoulds into coulds. And maybe I could say, if someone's trying to define me, you should have done this. Well, I guess, Uncle Bob, I guess I can count on you to say how you really feel. Or I remember somebody say, well, Jerry, you're just fat. I go, well, I guess I can count on you to say how you really feel about me. And again, kind of mean, insensitive, inappropriate, and, well, you should have lost weight. Well, I could have, and the choices I make at the time are based on what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what my experience is. I'm glad you had it all, my life all cleared, all lined out for me. And of course, many times, you just go, duh. You should have lost weight, Jerry. Duh. I mean, what's the purpose of you saying that? Other than to define me. And I even had, there were a couple of people on YouTube back when I weighed more than I weigh now. And they would say, well, I can't listen to someone whose weight is so out of control. And if you're that heavy, then you've got a lot more problems than I have, and I can't listen to your videos. Well, that's interesting. And of course, I would say there are plenty of other YouTube channels that you can listen to. And be careful about your judgments. It could put you in peril because you may not know everything. There are those who say, well, you should have studied business rather than art in college. Well, I could have, but I chose not to. Jerry, you should have made this video much shorter. It was too long. Well, I could have, but length is my strength. Or a Mark Twain response, which is, or I'm too lazy to make it shorter. I'm not going to let somebody define me. I'm open to other people's critiques if it is for my well-being and caring for me, but not someone who's blaming and shaming. That's to define me. Shaming and blaming is about defining you. Remember where you end and they begin. Stay on your side of the tennis net. Keep them out of your side of the tennis court. And keep the emotional net between you and them up. And that's appropriate. And that so many times we want to jump over and be in someone else's life, or jump over and they got to be in your life, telling you how to dress and look and what job to have and what color your hair should be and what, and that in my case, Mom would say, when you're going to get a haircut and all kinds of things. It's like, wait a minute, that's for me to decide. Intimacy can include lowering the net some, but only for those trusted and safe relationships in our lives. So we can lower that net, but in the circumstances in which we have trust and respect going on between the two of us. If we don't, my net is up. And in fact, the more disrespectful, the more blaming and shaming they are, the higher the net goes between me and them emotionally. Because they are wanting to define me. Don't give away ownership of your decisions. Own your own decisions, good or bad. I remember I filed for bankruptcy way back in the 1980s. And I did feel some shame over that. It was difficult. I felt guilt. I felt, and it was hard. And there were some people that thought I was wrong for doing that. Well, you should have just paid off all those debts. When actually I did pay off a good number of them, even after bankruptcy. But you shouldn't file bankruptcy. That's not a good thing to do. Well, duh. I know bankruptcy is not a good thing to do. However, when there are no other options and no other choices, then sometimes we land ourselves or have some failure in business or whatever. There's not a lot of remaining options that are available. And so, yes, I could have not filed bankruptcy, but that could have been worse than the bankruptcy itself. So, shoulds to coulds. Don't give away ownership of your decisions. Remember, decisions about your life are for you to make and not others. When they say, well, you shouldn't have filed for bankruptcy, Jerry. Well, I didn't know you were deciding that for me. And you weren't around at that time to give me all of the good counsel you're giving me now. I say in a playful way. Simply put, Jerry, you're making a bad decision. Or you made a bad decision. Well, how do you know I made a bad decision? We didn't even know each other then. And what tells you that I made a bad decision? Have you asked me what has gone into my decision making? Many times others assume your thinking process. They may not know all that was going on for me. Fears, trauma, triggers, and limited and scarcity choices that I was facing. So they don't know all that. They're just going, well, I'm painting the broad brush and going, well, you shouldn't have done that. And, we can also go, well, so what? I'm not the first person to make that decision. I'm not the first person who's ever filed bankruptcy. And it certainly wasn't. Many times people will feel lots of shame and guilt over divorce, for example. And as I've worked with people who have struggled with the difficult decisions about divorce, how painful and difficult it is. I don't have people coming in going, oh, well, I'd like to change wives today. I'd like to change husbands today. That just sounds like a great thing to do. Usually it involves lots of pain, decision-making, heartache, all kinds of things before they come to that decision. And so I like to give them that benefit of the doubt. Also, it's not for me to decide whether they should do that or not. Only I can decide that for myself. An additional point, you are not their burden carrier. You are not others' burden carrier. If others or someone else is upset about something that is within your adult right to do or decide, it's not your job or my job to make them feel good or better about it. You do not have to carry their burden of upsetness. Just like if somebody says, well, I'd never file bankruptcy. Why did you do that? That's pretty upsetting that you just took a cheap way out of whatever. It's like, it's not my burden to make you feel better about my bankruptcy decision. You're going to have to work on feeling better about it or not. That's up to you. But I don't have to make you feel better about it. I really don't. I'm choosing this person to marry. And let's say your parents are just so opposed to that. You're not my burden to carry. This is who I'm choosing. I'm sorry you're upset about it. That's something you'll have to work through. This is who I want to marry. It's not my job to make it all okay for you. That's your job. That's the adult's job. And that's what we do. Do you think I've ever had a friend who married somebody I thought it would be an awful marriage? And I've been wrong before too. I want you to know that. And I've been right. But the thing is, it's not mine to decide. If they ask me an opinion or if they want my counsel, then of course. If they don't, it's not mine to decide or to go and tell them, you better not do this. It's going to be terrible. Many times when people have already gotten to that point, it doesn't matter what you say. They're just going to have to learn from going through the experience. Saving others is a difficult thing to do. And from a person who spent a long time trying to save others, I know how difficult that can be. You are not their burden carrier. You are not their child. They are not your creator. We used to have a saying when I was pastoring in a church, maybe some of you recall, God loves you and has a plan for your life. We changed it to playfully, they love you and they have a plan for your life. Well, it sounds like they love you and they have a plan for your life. And they're playing God or they're playing creator because they know best what you should be doing. And we would say that many times. Or I love you and I have a plan for your life. And then we would joke about that. Because I'd say, well, you guys shouldn't be doing that. And I go, oh, I guess I love you and I have a plan for your life. I'm stepping over the tennis net over to your side. And I shouldn't be over there. I have heard Edwin Friedman say to someone who is defining him, Edwin Friedman being the marriage and family therapist, theologian, rabbi, who's a great author and a great marriage and family theoretician and Bowen follower. He says to someone who is defining him, I hear what you're saying. Now let me check with the boss. And I think that's a much better approach than, well, you're not the boss of me. That's more reactive. His was, oh, I hear what you're saying, but I'll check with the boss. And who is the boss? Me. I'm the boss. You're not the boss. Well, you shouldn't buy that car, Jerry. Oh, well, I hear what you're saying. Maybe I have some good reasons for that, but I'll check with the boss. Me, I get to decide it. I'm paying for it. I gotta finance it. It's for me to decide. Stop focusing on their purpose for you. Focus on your own purpose and direction. Here's an important point as well. Remember, don't let people lift you up. You are not your successes or your talents. You are a being, not a doing. Don't absorb the negative or the positive. Janelle Monáe, Monae, writes, don't get high off praises and don't get too low on critiques. And she's right. If you want to work on not getting low on negative messages, work on not getting high on positive ones or overly positive praises. You are not your work. You are not your parenting. You are not your relationships. You are you. Now I want to share a few examples that might be of help to you and maybe some responses. When anxiety is relatively low, it can be up a some, and you're not dealing with a malignant narcissist, I'm not saying these are the responses you want to do, though some people have enough in their relationship where they could even do this to a narcissist. But I'm not recommending that. I would say this is for just good old neurotic, dysfunctional people around you versus the malignant narcissist, let's say. Because many times people say, well, I wouldn't do that if I wouldn't say that to a narcissist. And I'm saying, well, then don't. I'm not telling anybody to use my examples in an unhealthy way. When someone says, you are lazy, I might respond, it sounds like I'm living up to your expectations. Or I think it's more important that I be lazy so you have something to complain about. So maybe I should be more lazy. You are stupid. Well, I don't think you realize how hard it is to be unstupid. I'm not stupid. I only act that way at times. Or, yeah, I know. We all are. Now let's talk about the upside of the fantasy sides that people will also convey to us. Oh, you're my muse. I hope not. I'll lead you into some very crazy places. Well, gosh, I didn't know you needed one, Mary. Because I don't want to be someone's fantasy or dream. Or, you're the only one that keeps me alive. Oh boy, then we're both in trouble. Keeping me alive is my job. Keeping you alive is your job. So I don't want to take in the high praise. I don't want to take in the negativity. You're such a helpful and good daughter. And many of us might fall for that. Because then, oh good, finally somebody gives me approval. No. Well, Dad, I doubt that. It's just me. And gosh, Mom, sometimes I'm good, sometimes I'm not. Well, you're such a helpful and good daughter. I'm just Jane, Dad, and I wanted to be of help. Or I was glad I could be of help. I want to matter-of-fact it and not fall for the praises and go, finally, I get a little drop of water for who I am as a person. No, I don't need that, and I don't need the negative. there are people who have said to me several times, and I know many of them are playful and being playful, and I'll be playful back with them too. So I don't take anything too seriously. But, oh, Jerry, I wish I would have had you for a dad. Oh my, you probably would be worse off than you are now. Oh, Jerry, I wish I'd have had you for a dad. You'd really need therapy if that had happened. Or a kind of perplexing kind of one. Jerry, I wish I would have had you for a dad because you're so fabulous. No, you wouldn't. I snore. We don't want to get caught in others' negativity about us and their fantasies about us. Neither one. Become determined to like and love yourself. Then it won't matter whether others like or love you. I hope you'll please subscribe, join, like, and comment. You can also donate on my website to help me keep these posts for more videos on here. I want to thank you all for joining me today. Have a great day and be wise.
To talk about safety and enmeshment and fusion. I've had the experience of having clients, Jerry, who've been in a relationship where they've been very close and very enmeshed in the relationship, but they did not feel safe. And from a family systems approach, I realized that can lead to problems.
And it certainly can, and confusion as well, because a lot of people believe that enmeshment and fusion should equal safety. It should feel safe. And by the way, my name's Jerry Wise, and this is Andrew Holzman, and we're therapists at Family Tree Counseling Associates. And I want to welcome you to another one of our videos. And maybe on this subject we can help you with the aspect of enmeshment or fusion. Mm-hmm. And I remember you asking me the other day about that issue, and it seemed, in fact, I was talking recently to someone about why fusion or enmeshment, couples who experience that, feel so tight or so close emotionally, but yet it doesn't feel safe, and it doesn't feel comfortable, and I think from a family systems perspective it's not, because fusion always means you gotta be me, I gotta be you. That's kind of what fusion means. And so if that contract is ever broken, then there's some kind of consequence or disturbance or irritability or distance or something that happens if that fusion isn't maintained. So the fusion must always be maintained in a relationship for it to feel comfortable. So at any time it can kind of blow up.
Right. And I see therapy as being kind of the idea of how do you find yourself? How do you try to find yourself within, whether it's within a relationship or just if you're working on yourself. And if you're fused with someone, it's very comfortable. It's very easy to kind of take on their attributes or want to serve them or give up, some of yourself in this relationship. And people feel pretty comfortable doing that for a time, and then they get irritated by that. They get hurt by that because it's not real closeness. It's a pseudo-closeness. And if you try to do something different, if you have your own interests, if there's something you want to do that's outside of the system of what you've created, then there's a lot of conflict, a lot of pain, and people going, whoa, you know, this is not what I signed up for. This doesn't feel good to me. And
You change the arrangement.
change the arrangement, and that's uncomfortable for folks.
And I think when maybe we should define fusion or enmeshment a little bit,
Sure.
that because a lot of people may not know exactly what I mean. I'll bet they know what we mean by experience, but maybe we can kind of define what fusion or enmeshment, or we also call kind of codependency, is like. I think it's a relationship where all of the emphasis is put on the other and not on the self. Fusion is a de-selfing. There's no me, there's only us. And that we-ness, there's too much we-ness and not enough I-ness. And that's kind of what fusion is, or enmeshment, and that I live underneath your skin and you live underneath my skin.
Right. And a lot of people see that as love, as romance, as
Exactly.
the way relationships should be, as evidenced in movies and in songs, and that feels wonderful, and that is romantic, and I think every couple experiences that, especially when they first get together, or most couples do, where they're finishing each other's sentences, and they're being intimate, and they're being close, and jobs don't matter, and kids, if you have them, don't matter as much. Everything is kind of sacrificed to the experience of this relationship. And people love that, and they miss that, and they want to maintain that, but there's a downside to it. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the downside to being joined at the hip, and not seeing that you can experience and take care of yourself in certain ways. I've had clients who
Or being yourself.
being yourself. I've had clients who are it's almost like the Snoopy cartoon where he's a vulture, you know, just poised, waiting for the other person to, you know, kind of do something because they're scared of doing something on their own for fear of upsetting this relationship, of being yelled at or disappointing the person. So they're just kind of waiting around, as we would say, codependency. You don't have a self. You're kind of looking to the other to validate you. And it's kind of a difficult way to be in a relationship, because then the other person really wants to, in my experience, have that person have a self.
And like you say, that safety is an issue, because that de-selfing, or that too much we-ness, or that enmeshment is always precarious. It's always got to be worked on and be maintained. You just can't be comfortable where you're okay and I'm okay.
Correct.
Where you're a plus and I'm a plus. That comfort level is not there. There's always a sense of there's only us. And so the I-ness shouldn't come in. And you mentioned a very good point, Andy, about how our culture so promotes fusion or enmeshment as equal to love. All the love songs, all the movies, everything says that's what love's about. If you can just get this oceanic togetherness, then that's true love, and that's what we're all working towards. When actually, if you look at developmental psychology, there's only 2 times in life when that would be a healthy state to be in. And one of them is when you're an infant. You need that enmeshment with someone who's bonding with you as a caregiver. You have to have that. That dependency is normal. Then I think of another stage in which you've just fallen in love, and it's that honeymoon phase, and that's kind of a very enmeshing time. But other than that, there's no other healthy time where that would be normal. That's not normal love. Normal love, I think of, and I think we're also talking about, maybe we define it as, enmeshment is the 50-50 model. I bring my 50%, you bring your 50%, we equal 100%. But isn't that a problem when I say that? Because that's an enmeshment model. A non-enmeshment model is I bring 100% and you bring 100%, and then we have a relationship. That's a healthy model. The other is I bring my half, you bring your half, and we'll try to make one person out of it.
You complete me.
You complete me, kind of thing. And that always fails. It always will feel uncomfortable, unsafe.
And will break down.
And will break down.
It's problematic, and most of the folks that we see come into our office are dealing with the sadness of not having that oceanic feeling, of not having that enmeshment and that fusion and that, we had that, and this person changed, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 15 years into the relationship. Things are different. They don't feel that same connection, which, there are other reasons for that. There are many reasons for that people cut off. But they miss that big glob of connection. That's how I think of it.
Right.
And it's really just, you lose yourself in that, and I think at one person either gets very bored with that, or one person starts to grow and they want to have a self, and again, that upsets the system. Either way upsets the system.
And wouldn't you find that when you deal with couples, that many times couples have come because one person has decided they want to be more of their true selves.
Right.
And then that upsets the apple cart.
Right.
And then now we got to come into therapy because one person is starting to grow and the other person's saying, hey, what happened to what we had?
Right.
And the other person wants to grow says, well, I'm not totally happy with exactly what we had before. And I'd like to find more of me. And I believe that we're also taught in society that once you have that initial enmeshment called the honeymoon phase of a marital, because there's stages of marriage life as well, and the honeymoon phase, that's supposed to be the norm for the rest of the relationship, for the rest of your life. Well, that's a myth. And that people don't realize that a part of marriage is, how can this marriage be big enough for each of us to grow and to change and to be who we are, to become who we are? And boy, that's very threatening for a lot of people to think of that, to think in those terms.
I think of that as true intimacy, that you can have someone in your life who really starts to see that you're going to grow and that can accept you, and that's healthy. It's healthy to have a relationship where the person brings up feelings in you and brings up issues in you, where you start to see your life in a different way, and you grow beyond some of the pains and injuries of your childhood, and you start to have strength. And in my marriage, my wife helps me do that. She gets to me in ways that bring up feelings that challenge me, that help me work on myself, and I think that's a good experience. It's not something that you would look forward to and think about in terms of when you get married, but it is something that does happen. So, at Family Tree we think, well, kind of almost the key point is the person that you marry or the person you're in a relationship with helps you grow by getting under your skin, by kind of challenging you, by bringing up things that you might try to push aside. And enmeshment and fusion can be that, where you're pushing it aside. You're just focused on the other person. You're just seeing their attributes.
Helps you to avoid.
Helps you avoid, the kind of the experience of feeling things that non-fusion would have you feel.
And I think that's a great point, because enmeshment is denial. Enmeshment denies the self, denies the self's issues, and we just fuse. I become you, you become me. And so I don't have to look at anything. But that doesn't mean I'm happy, and it doesn't mean I know myself or I am myself. And like you say, the family tree model we have of marriage, and thinking of that as how a spouse really does and has the ability to push our buttons, because the knots in my head fit the holes in their head.
Right.
And they really do push all of our issues because we're in a very close relationship. Whereas the relationship I have with the clerk at JCPenney's wouldn't do that, because we're not in that kind of relationship. But a marital relationship will push all those buttons, and that is a good thing. We see that as a good thing.
Right.
For most people, they look at it and see it as a negative thing.
Correct.
Because society says that's a negative thing. And really, that's society going against the grain. I mean, it's going against what's reality. And so we have to be careful what we learn from society about marriage and relationships, and because it's all kind of gooey and fluffy and
Right.
and puppy dog-ish and music video-ish.
And don't you find that the less healthy a relationship in terms of your family of origin, the more fantasy that you have about having a great relationship or a fused relationship? So the more dysfunctional family that you grew up in, you're going to really expect this relationship that you're in when you're married to be this perfect relationship. And of course it can't live up to your expectations. There's no way. And so
Right.
you're disappointed and you're in pain and you don't know how to talk about it and you're trying for more fusion and more connection in the way that you know how. So you're going to over stress the system in that way.
And I think that's a perfect point, and probably a good point to end on for our video, Andy. That right, the more dysfunctional our past, the more we'll idealize what we're going to get in marriage, and it's all going to turn out beautifully. I hope you've been helped by our video today, and I want to thank Andy Holzman, who's a therapist here at Family Tree.
And Jerry Wise.
Thank you.
Another thing.
And I hope this has helped you regarding enmeshment and fusion, and to think more about that. If you want help, give us a call. You can contact us, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
It's talk that's trying to get you to behave in a way so I don't have to deal with my immaturity as a narcissistic parent. I don't have to deal with that if I can get you to change. So what that they feel that way? Okay, they felt that way for 20 years, and they're still that way because they're still that way. They're narcissistic parents. To break free, start the work of self-differentiation. And that self-differentiation is, I am different from you. Remember, they changed your diapers. So therefore, they should get to know what your raise is when you're 45 years old from your work and what raise you got because they changed your diaper when you were an infant. Are you tired of feeling controlled by your narcissistic parents? In this video, I want to share 10 practical steps to flip the power dynamics with narcissistic parents and reclaim your emotional independence. I'm Jerry Wise, and for over 45 years, I've helped hundreds of thousands of people get their narcissistic and dysfunctional family out of them so they can finally reclaim their true self and find clarity, peace, and lasting freedom. Number 1, stop pleasing your narcissistic parents. Certainly, if you're in a situation where you are dependent on them, financially, housing-wise, then it's very unwise to maybe challenge them outright. And I would get help for yourself if you're in that situation. If you have more autonomy, meaning you're an adult living somewhere else or have your own family and still have narcissistic parents as an adult, growing up in a narcissistic family, you were conditioned to please your parents. Your sense of worth was borrowed from their approval, creating an emotional and mental pseudo-self, a version of you that existed only to serve their needs, not your own needs. As an adult, the habit of people-pleasing continues, often leaving you disconnected from your real self. And to break this pattern, you need to stop seeking validation from others, validation from your parent, and start choosing what is right for you. I know I've had situations in which very powerful female or male executives of big companies, where they make all of the decisions, they go home and fall into a child role with their parents, and particularly narcissistic parents. They lose all of that professionalism. They lose all of that adulthood that they have when they're sitting at the head of the boardroom table, and they become children when they go home. So that's that family Wi-Fi and super self that I talk so much about happening for us as adults. This is how you start to declare yourself, calmly stating who you really are, even when others don't approve. And I think calmly is very important. I think matter-of-factly is very important, even when others don't approve. We're not stating who we are to start an argument, though it could start an argument, but I'm not going to engage in the argument. I'm going to try to stay calm and matter of fact. Number 2, break free from narcissistic parents' emotional manipulation. Make emotional manipulation more difficult for the narcissistic parent by focusing on detachment and cutting the emotional umbilical cord. Because we have that emotional umbilical cord that's still connected to our parents and that family super self. Narcissistic parents often control, gaslight, and manipulate you, making you doubt your perceptions and feelings. They turn your emotional reality upside down, causing you to question your own thoughts, creating the version of you your parents needed you to be, not who you truly are. These manipulations don't stop when we grow up. You might still find yourself doubting your feelings or taking responsibility for others' emotions. To flip the dynamic, you need to recognize their manipulation for what it is and stay grounded in your true feelings, those that come from your authentic self, not from the family's programming. In my Road to Self program, I teach you how to recognize the difference between systems feelings, I also call these false feelings, from your true feelings, the family super self feelings from your true feelings. These videos that I present on YouTube are short and I can't go into all of the details around these concepts, so please join the Road to Self program. Number 3, stop engaging in power struggles with narcissistic parents. Drop your side of the tug of war rope. And I teach people over and over again to let go of your side of the rope. Because if you stay in a tug of war with them, the arguments, the wanting to change them, the wanting them to understand you, when you stay in that tug of war, it's just more miserable for you and you don't become more adult-like, you become more childlike. Narcissistic parents thrive on creating conflict to maintain control. They pull you into endless power struggles, making you feel like you have to constantly fight for validation and for respect. Power struggles serve enmeshment or over closeness emotionally. And that's at the basis of what we learned in our family of origin growing up. We were too connected emotionally to our family of origin and did not grow into healthier adults and having a healthier distance emotionally from our family, and particularly a narcissistic parent. As an adult, you might find yourself still caught in these conflicts, trying to prove yourself, trying to gain approval, or correct your narcissistic parent. But the key to flipping the dynamic is to observe without absorbing. See the dysfunction clearly without getting pulled into it or reacting. And we can drop the rope by going, that is them, that's how they think, I don't think that way, and I'm not going to engage in that because there's no sense. This is the way they see it. And don't think you can talk them out of it. I'm sure you've tried and found that to be rather a frustrating endeavor. Practice calmly stepping out of the emotional chaos they try to draw you into. Number 4, stand firm in your truth with narcissistic parents. Narcissistic parents often invalidated your voice, making you feel like your truth didn't matter. Over time, you were trained to suppress your thoughts and feelings to keep the peace or to avoid their wrath, anger, shaming, discounting. This invalidation follows you into adulthood, making it hard to express your truth without fear of backlash. To flip the power dynamic, you need to practice self-definition, knowing and expressing your thoughts, feelings, and limits without needing your family or others' approval. And we can do that, and we can learn to do that. We can learn to not need their approval or their acceptance or whatever views they have of my own sense of self or what I want or wish or my boundaries. This is how you begin to get the family out of you. You stop letting their emotional Wi-Fi control your internal world. You don't have to argue with them to stand firm in your truth. Make sure you know your thoughts and feelings. And you can know their thoughts and their feelings, which they'll make those very clear to you, which are often distorted, blaming, even delusional. But just make sure you know yours. They can have theirs. You don't have to react or respond. It doesn't matter. So what that they feel that way? Okay, they felt that way for 20 years. Why am I going to be upset about it 20 years later? And they're still that way because they're still that way. They're narcissistic parents. That's how they are. And I want to get to the place where it doesn't matter. Number 5, stop allowing narcissistic parents to define your identity. Narcissistic parents stifled your individuality, demanding that you meet their emotional needs and making your worth contingent on fulfilling their expectations. This left you without a strong sense of true self, as your identity was shaped entirely by their needs. In adulthood, you may still feel disconnected from who you really are, constantly adapting to meet others' expectations. To break free, start the work of self-differentiation. And that self-differentiation is, I am different from you. You're you, and I am me. I don't need to change you, and you don't need to change me. You still may try, but it's not going to have an impact. By recognizing and asserting your identity separate from your family's control, you must learn to stand in who you really are, no longer defined by their version of you. And again, this is the whole means by which I help people get out of the role of being a scapegoat. You may not be able to change their view of you as a scapegoat, but you can change your view of you being a scapegoat. It's their craziness, not the reality that you are truly this role. Number 6, break the cycle of guilt and shame from narcissistic parents. Narcissistic parents use guilt and shame to keep you tied to them, making you feel responsible for their emotions or actions. This emotional glue creates an invisible bond that pulls you back into their dysfunction, even as an adult. These feelings of guilt and shame can persist throughout adulthood, causing you to feel anxious, obligated, or inadequate. To flip the dynamic, you must recognize these feelings as systems feelings, not your true feelings. These are program responses designed to keep you hooked. Your job is to detach emotionally from their guilt and their shame and reclaim your own peace. Number 7, emotionally detach from your narcissistic parents. Narcissistic parents made you emotionally dependent on them, leaving you unable to develop your own sense of self and autonomy. This is how they control. You must be dependent on me, emotionally, mentally, adult-wise, financially, and in many other ways. And needing my approval, all of that adds up to a strong ability to control. They needed you to stay attached to them emotionally, which stunted your ability to grow independently and autonomously. As an adult, you might still feel like you need your family's or others' approval or emotional support to function. To break free, you must practice emotional detachment, creating internal boundaries that allow you to stay grounded and make decisions for yourself, regardless of their influence or who it pleases or who it doesn't please. External boundaries is, I'm not coming to visit you every week. Internal boundary is, if you think I'm crazy, it doesn't matter to me. That's an internal boundary. It doesn't go in. I have a boundary emotionally. And that takes more discussion, more work, and that's why I do a lot more discussion of internal boundaries in the Road to Self program, which I hope you will sign up for. A good book for men might be the book No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. And for women, Growing Yourself Up by Jenny Brown. And I always like books by Harriet Lerner. She's a great author, using family systems and kind of talking about us being enmeshed in families. Number 8, learn to set healthy boundaries with narcissistic parents. You may ask, well, how on earth do I set healthy boundaries with a narcissistic parent? Do you know how many times I've gotten that question and people have asked me? And I certainly understand the difficulty, but what they're confusing, I think, is if I'm setting a boundary, it is changing them. A boundary is not set to change them. I hope they honor it, but it's not a boundary to change them. A boundary is there to protect and care about me. Narcissistic parents have no respect for boundaries, making you feel guilty for even having them. They invade your emotional and physical space, leaving you feeling drained, violated, and unseen. Well, I told you not to buy that dress for your wedding. I told you not to marry them, and you went ahead and married them anyway. That's very inappropriate. Those are boundary breaking comments. Setting a boundary with a narcissistic parent does not mean they take it well. They won't, and they will resist. They will try to get you to remove the boundary or just plain ignore it. Setting boundaries includes what I do when they do what they do. See them less, call them less, ignore them, state if they change, you will respond in a more positive way, but leave it up to them to change or be who they are. For example, if I don't want to talk about my spouse with a narcissistic parent, then I might say, well, Mom, if you bring this up, I will stay quiet or I'll leave. I've said several times I don't wish to talk about my husband with you, warning them if we're going to discuss this on the phone, when I said this topic was out of bounds, then I'm afraid I will have to hang up. So again, it's setting a boundary has to do with what I'm going to do with what they're going to do with my boundary. I'm not trying to change them, though I might like them to honor my boundary. There's nothing wrong with that. But they may not. And I always like to go into it with they probably won't honor my boundary. So I might as well start thinking of what I'm going to be doing when they don't honor my boundary, because they will test you. And they will hope you will go back to the same old way. As an adult, you may find it hard to set boundaries, always feeling guilty or afraid to say no. To flip the dynamic, you need to set clear, non-negotiable boundaries that protect your emotional well-being. This is your right, not a privilege, and it's necessary for your healing. Number 9, stop taking responsibility for narcissistic parents' actions. Narcissistic parents often make you feel responsible for their actions, their emotions, their thoughts, their failures. You were taught that it was your job to fix their problems or make them happy, leaving you with a heavy emotional burden. And I think about the holidays. And I'm more familiar with the Christian holidays, but they're holidays of many different groups. And in the, say Christmas holiday or Thanksgiving even, which is a secular holiday in most places, that when you say, I'm not able to be there because I need to do something with my family, then you're now responsible for their unhappiness. No, you're not responsible for their unhappiness. Some parents would say, oh, I'm really disappointed you're not going to be there. I really would love to have you there. But I understand you have a right to make that choice. There are parents who do that. Rather than, oh, now you're hurting me and I feel so awful. Why would you betray the family? Everybody's going to be there. You have to be there for us to have a good Thanksgiving, or it won't even be Thanksgiving. Well, that's all shaming talk and guilting talk, and it's talk that's trying to get you to behave in a way so I don't have to deal with my immaturity as a narcissistic parent. I don't have to deal with that if I can get you to change. As an adult, this pattern can continue, causing you to take on guilt or blame for their issues. To break free, you must stop taking responsibility for their actions, their feelings. Their behavior is theirs to own, not yours. Number 10, limit narcissistic parents' access to your life. Narcissistic parents taught you early on that your life was an open book to them. Remember, they changed your diapers. So therefore, they should get to know what your raise is when you're 45 years old from your work and what raise you got because they changed your diaper when you were an infant. I mean, I'm sure many of you have had that happen before. Or, why change your diaper? What do you mean? I'm your mother. I'm your father. I should ask these questions. No, you're being nibby and don't have a good sense of self between yourself and myself. They expected you to meet their emotional needs at the expense of your own boundaries, leaving you feeling constantly exposed and dependent on their approval. As an adult, you may still feel like you have to share every detail of your life with them, even if it means sacrificing your privacy and independence. Many people talk about this as that we are the supply for the narcissistic parent. We are their supply for the narcissist. And that supply is everything about our lives, all of our emotions. They can control us, and that's their supply. The key to flipping the power dynamic is setting external boundaries, the outer expressions of knowing who you are and what you need without guilt. I don't want to talk about what my raise is if I'm 45 years old and just got a promotion at work. I don't think anybody needs to know that. But my spouse, my partner, people who need to know, the IRS, taxes, I mean, I have to share with some people. But what is the point of sharing that with mom and dad? What are they going to do with that? I fear the narcissistic parent may want to gossip about it, or they may want to use it against you at some time in the future. Oh, or you're making $185,000 now. So blah, 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 blah. Well, you weren't telling them that to get that kind of manipulation. To truly reclaim your power, you must stop playing by their rules, overvaluing their distorted thoughts and feelings, and giving them the power to make you feel bad. Every action you take to detach emotionally, set boundaries, and prioritize your needs is a step towards flipping the power dynamic. Remember, your parents don't have to keep defining you through their control and dysfunction. You can flip the power dynamic by finally becoming who you truly are and staying grounded in the work of your self-differentiation. And again, I talk a lot more about self-differentiation, how you accomplish that, what are the steps in doing that in the program, Your Road to Self. And if you're finally ready to break free and start living with clarity and peace and grounded connection to your true self, then join that program, the Road to Self program. Many who have joined the program say it was the missing piece in their healing journey, the step that finally helped them get their family out of them and stand strong as their true self. There are many testimonials for the program. No testimonial was solicited other than, if you'd like to give a testimony, you write it however you want to write it. All the testimonials were unsolicited. They're real. There are no fake ones on there. I will not allow that. If you're not sure if Road to Self is for you, then start with the free 84-minute self-differentiation training. Over 30,000 people have joined the free training as their first step. Click the links in the description to get started. And be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so that you'll never miss a new video coming out. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, and be wise. My name is Jerry Wise, and I'm the director for the Center of Self-Differentiation in Carmel, Indiana, on the north side of Indianapolis in Indiana. I work with clients in my office and via the internet. This video is entitled Narcissism: Stop the Flying Monkeys. For those of you familiar with narcissistic articles and books, you will find in there, in the world of narcissistic abuse and narcissistic triangles and relationships, there's a common technique the narcissist, and particularly the malignant narcissist, uses to get what they want. To get what they want to shape, to force, to mold, to pressure, and to manipulate others into doing their bidding. Just like the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, she used her flying monkeys to fulfill her will and to try to get rid of Dorothy, or to bring Dorothy to heal, to bring Dorothy into her power, to also get from Dorothy what she wanted to get from her. She sent out her flying monkeys, which affected her and Dorothy and the people around her. And the same dynamic occurs in narcissistic families and narcissistic relationships today. And the same type of thing happens. Many types of people use flying monkeys. And there's a whole continuum along the line to somewhat benign use of malignant monkeys, or of flying monkeys, to very malignant use of flying monkeys. Many people use flying monkeys, not just narcissists. Bipolar folks use flying monkeys. Emotionally immature, the avoidant folks use flying monkeys. The angry and the passive aggressive use flying monkeys. Very, very needy people use flying monkeys to get their needs met through other people and using other people. An example of flying monkeys would be this. Janet has a narcissistic sister who is very immature, very narcissistic. Whenever Janet confronts her sister, she just becomes very angry, defensive, and blaming, even lying, melodramatic. And this creates a real problem in the family. And so their communication is broken down for a while. But then Janet's sister will use other people in the family to get to Janet, to either try to convince her one way or another, or to pull her back into the relationship, or to try to convince Janet that she's been wrong and insensitive and unloving. And those are the flying monkeys that Janet's sister will use to get Janet to change. There are two types of flying monkeys. There's the willing, complicit partners as flying monkeys, the willing flying monkeys, and then there's the well-meaning duped flying monkeys. So at times we use different kind of approaches for different types of flying monkeys. First of all, often flying monkeys have their own agendas and their own hope-for rewards. In other words, pleasing the narcissist, or becoming the golden child because they resent the golden child who's being ousted at this point, and they'd like to take over that role of being the favored one in the family. Or flying monkeys may not have an agenda other than just to keep the peace. In other words, they may not totally agree with the narcissist, or they may think, oh, the narcissist is being unreasonable again, but I need to keep the peace, and let's just see if we can keep the, peace at all costs. And let's be compliant so we don't have conflict. The conflict avoider kind of flying monkeys. Both may violate boundaries. Both have not done the work to connect with you and deal with you directly outside the influence of the narcissist. For example, they don't ask you your side of the story to find the truth. They don't attempt to understand what your feelings are, or they may even feign or pretend to understand what your feelings are and to pretend to get your side of the story, only to have you do what the narcissist wants you to do or to be. Flying monkeys will act as friends, compatriots, caring, empathetic, and then betray us to the narcissist. The narcissist wants full control and full control of you. They want you to play your expected role in the family of origin, or at the workplace, or in the church, or in the marriage, or at home with the kids, any number of emotional systems. The narcissist wants full control. of others. Narcissistic divorces can be full of flying monkeys who testify and create difficulties for the partner who's on the out. I've seen narcissistic fathers try to take custody from their caring mothers by using flying monkeys to make the mother seem crazy and unfit to have custody. Even the narcissistic parent knows he has many problems, but he still wants control of the kids and over his ex-wife. And that's the narcissistic power control. And they'll use, and unfortunately, if they have lots of money, they can pay for lots of flying monkeys, from attorneys to friends to families. They can influence other people to do their bidding. I just heard another example recently where a sibling was used as a flying monkey for a father or parents who are narcissistic. The scapegoated brother was asking his brother for a relationship which was separate from his parents, because the parents always were critical and abusive to this brother. And because of their inappropriate, malignant narcissistic behavior with his children and his wife, which were very well-founded. Instead of being willing to have a separate relationship with his brother, he was being used by their father as a flying monkey to tell the brother who's on the outs that he could not do that. He wanted the family to stay together and not get separated out into camps, was the reason he wanted to say that. But actually the brother who's connected with the father is in a camp. It's the narcissistic father's camp. But he's saying, I don't want to break us off into camps. All the brother was asking for was just a one-on-one relationship with his brother without the interference of his parents. The flying monkey brother knows his father is a narcissist, but cannot deal with his father's rejection if he were to have a separate relationship with his brother, and without mom and dad involved heavily and deeply in that relationship and knowing everything about it. The brother refused, hurting many people in the process, but keeping the narcissist as king of the hill. And it's so sad that the brother did not see that pattern. Malignant narcissists will use manipulation, coercion, money, inheritance, withdrawing their love, gifts, punishments, and deception to get their way. And when that doesn't work, the only thing left for the malignant narcissist to do is to send in the monkeys, to send the flying monkeys. Flying monkeys are the metastatic spread of the malignant narcissistic cancer or toxicity in the family. So how do we stop flying monkeys? I work with folks all the time to help them to reduce the impact of flying monkeys, to reduce the impact of flying monkeys on them, to get the flying monkeys to stop, etc. Expect you're going to have flying monkeys if there's narcissism in the mix. Anticipate them. Don't be fooled by a wolf in sheep's clothing. Stop the source of information to the narcissist through the flying monkeys. Stop providing that information, because that valuable intelligence that they're going out to get and bring back to the narcissist is used by the narcissist for control, manipulation, to lie about, so that they have a grain of truth in a great big lie. And so we stop that flow of information, and we refuse to give that information to the flying monkey. The best vaccination against flying monkeys is self-differentiation, which I train and teach people. And you can see I have over 120 videos on YouTube, and many of them are on self-differentiation. So check out those videos. This process of learning to be self while staying connected to others is a powerful antidote and a powerful vaccination against flying monkeys and the narcissists. Talk about the process and not the content with the flying monkey. Cousin Mabel, and again, process versus content, and I use those terms often in helping and training people. Cousin Mabel calls out of the blue and asks you how you're doing and how you are getting along with your parents. Talk about the process and not the content of her question. You don't have to tell Cousin Mabel how you're feeling about your parents or anything about your relationship with your parents. Just avoid the subject and be ready to talk about other things. For example, Mabel calls and asks, hi, Auntie, and she asks that question of you, and you go, hi, Auntie, how's Uncle George? How has your heart been doing? Have you talked with Mom and Dad lately? What do they have to say to you? How have you guys been relating? Give no information to Mabel about your relationship with your mom and dad. Ask for info from her. Gosh, Auntie, you haven't called me in 8 months. This is also talking about the process of what's going on between you and Mabel, rather than the content. Gosh, Auntie, you haven't called me in 8 months. I wonder what prompted you to call today. And you just kind of stay confused and kind of inquiring. Content is how you feel about your parents. Content is expressing your pain or anger or frustration with your narcissistic mother with Aunt Mabel. Don't do that. Process is addressing and alluding to what is going on between you and Mabel, your narcissistic mom. You haven't called me in 8 months. That's curious, don't you think, Mabel, Aunt Mabel? Or asking Mabel what she's feeling towards your narcissistic mother, and is actually a process reversal. And we could talk more than that. If you work with me, I can help you with that. And actually, what they're asking you and what they want to know from you, you turn it around and ask them what about them and get the information from them. Often flying monkeys are not ready for that. They didn't expect you to ask them about that. Using a Wizard of Oz theme, I've come up with these tips dealing with flying monkeys. It is obvious to you and to the flying monkey what they're doing. If it's obvious to you and to the flying monkey what they're doing, send them back to the Wicked Witch of the West, or use the I only speak to wicked witches directly approach. I only speak to the narcissist. I don't speak to their minions. Doug, just tell Dad when he wants to accept and talk to me about my wife and kids or whatever. I'm always open, but I'm not going to have this discussion with you, Doug. Secondly, I don't speak monkey. I don't speak flying monkey. Gosh, Aunt Mabel, I don't know what you're talking about or what you're asking me or what you mean. How's my relationship with my mom and dad? That's kind of an odd question. Well, Jerry, I heard from your mother that you and she had a falling out. I still don't know what you're talking about, nor do I know what this means or what you want from me. Again, my assumptions are my relationship with my narcissistic mother is between me and her, not me and her and Aunt Mabel. So I very definitely can be confused about why she's asking and what the problem is. I don't even know what the problem is. Just because Mom and I have a falling out doesn't mean it involves Aunt Mabel in any way. So I don't know what you mean. What's going on between me and my mom? I'm confused. I don't speak flying monkey. Do you know you're a flying monkey? Aunt Mabel, you might have good intentions and you might have some concern about our family, but you and I don't have an intimate enough relationship between the two of us for me and you to talk about my relationship with my sister or my mother. So we should keep our conversation about what's going on between us and not others. I think Mom's using you to get information. Are you aware of that, Aunt Mabel? Another approach is, how's the flying monkey life? And that's in which we empathize with the flying monkey. And I might respond, well, gosh, Doug, it must be difficult to have to do Dad's bidding and to keep him happy by coming to me for information. Is that really difficult for you? How's it feel to be a flying monkey? It must be really hard. And that's a shame. If you want more help with self-differentiation, and if you want more help with narcissistic families or narcissists who are in your life, or handling the flying monkeys, if you want to learn more about identifying and leading a narcissism-free life, contact me and we can set up a Skype, FaceTime, or phone session and work together to free you from the narcissists in your life. My contact information is on the screen. I hope that you will join our YouTube channel, which are all free videos on YouTube. If you want more resources or a complete listing of over my 120 videos free on YouTube, contact me via email. Use my email address, and I will send them to you free. I want to thank you very much for watching today, and have a great day.